Hi, I'm Malis. My mother-in-law slapped me, hard, in front of 500 people. Why? Because I refused to hand over the $6.9 million company I built from scratch to her precious son. But the slap wasn't the beginning. The betrayal started long before that night. In boardrooms, behind closed doors, in whispers that erased my name and replaced it with his. And what they didn't know was that someone very important was watching. You ever wonder what happens when the woman they try to erase fights back without raising her voice? Before we dive in, where are you listening from tonight? Drop a comment below. Let's begin. I pulled up to the estate 15 minutes late. The street was already lined with Blacktown cars and valets in pressed jackets. Bryony had texted twice, "Where are you?" Vera was already parading around. I replied with a quick, "Be there in 2." I'd barely had time to breathe since stepping out of the client meeting in downtown Charleston. My heels clicked too loud against the stone walkway as I moved fast, smoothing my hair, trying not to feel rushed. I hated being late, especially to something I was paying for. The entry doors swung open into a room dripping with soft candlelight and curated elegance. The historic manor had been redone with modern minimalist decor, but the bones of old Charleston still lingered. Crown moldings, original wood floors, the faint scent of lemon oil polish. The room burst into applause as I entered, just in time to hear the MC announce, "And here she is, the lovely future Mrs. Landro." Polite clapping. Some turned to look. Others just kept sipping their cocktails. No mention of the fact that I, Malis Ravenwood, was the reason this entire event existed. I signed the venue contract. I paid the florist. I funded the campaign being toasted tonight. I smiled through the fog of humiliation, the sting of being unseen. I scanned the room for Bryony and spotted her near the mirrored bar, already clutching a glass of white wine like a weapon. I walked over quickly, past floral arrangements that screamed old money and effortlessness. "You hear that?" Bryony leaned in. "You're a lovely future Mrs. now." My throat tightened. I took a sip from her glass before she could stop me. "I don't even get a title at my own event. And look at this." She handed me a folded dinner napkin. Elegant ivory cotton, monogrammed in gold script, Landro Legacy Gala. "That's not our brand," I muttered. "Mavencore isn't even on this." "Keep going." Bryony nudged her head toward the giant screen at the front of the ballroom. A looping slideshow was playing, photos of Joran posing with executives, Vera at a charity gala, a quote in bold cursive, "A vision by Joran." I clenched my jaw. "I sent them our branding kit," I whispered. "This was supposed to highlight the merger, not whatever this is." Bryony gave a tight smile. "Maybe you're just the silent partner now." I exhaled through my nose. "Where are we sitting?" She handed me a sleek, black-sealed envelope. Inside was a cream cardstock menu card. I frowned. "Table 12. I looked again. "Near the kitchen," Bryony said before I could ask. I made my way toward the front to find Joran. He stood beside Vera, both of them glowing beneath the chandelier, entertaining a circle of investors and socialites. I waited for a pause, stepped in. "Hey," I said quietly. "Quick question. Why are we at table 12? Joran blinked. "What?" "Bryony and I, our seats. They're near the kitchen. I thought we were hosting." Vera turned to me, all pearls and Botox. "Oh dear," she cooed. "Did the staff mix it up again? They're just overworked. I'll have someone fix it." I knew that tone. It wasn't incompetence. It was dismissal, with a smile. "Don't worry," I said flatly. "We'll sit where we're told." Back at table 12, Bryony was already unfolding her napkin like it was a flag of surrender. A server passed by with the amuse-bouche and did a double-take. "Oh, Ms. Landro, I mean, Ms. Ravenwood. Sorry, you weren't supposed to—" Bryony waved him off. "She's used to not being on the list." I stared at the place card in front of me. It didn't even have my name, just a generic guest of Mr. Landro. By the time the speeches started, I was numb. Joran tapped his champagne glass and stood before the crowd. "Thank you, everyone. Tonight is about legacy, about building something that will last." I watched his mouth move, watched the admiration in Vera's eyes, the way she dabbed at invisible tears. My inspiration, my rock, Joran said, raising his glass, has always been my mother. Everything I've learned about business, about endurance, comes from her example. I kept waiting, for my name, for a nod, even just a thank you. Nothing. Bryony squeezed my hand under the table. It's fine, I whispered. It's all fine. And later, in the restroom, I stared at my reflection. The lighting was too flattering to match my mood. My hair was perfect, my dress fit like armor, but the woman staring back looked erased. This company was mine, I murmured, before he ever knew what B2B meant. I ran cold water over my wrists, grounding myself. I'd built Mavencore from a second-bedroom office with 3 clients and a laptop. I had slept in airports, skipped Christmases. I once pitched a Fortune 500 board while on antibiotics for walking pneumonia. I didn't do all that to become the lovely future Mrs. As I stepped out of the restroom and re-entered the ballroom, the music had shifted to jazz. Guests were seated for dinner. A server approached me, smiling brightly. "Mrs. Landro, here's your menu." He handed me a heavy embossed card. I looked down. Mrs. Malis Landro, supporting guest. I stood motionless for a moment, then looked up at the server. He was already gone. As I stepped forward, I finally saw my place was never at the table, only next to it. That realization didn't land like thunder. It slipped in quietly, like a cold draft through a closed window, the kind that makes you question if the house ever kept you warm in the first place. 2 weeks passed. I kept showing up to work like nothing had happened, letting the rhythm of spreadsheets and client calls cover the echo of that evening. But something in me had cracked open. It wasn't anger, not yet. It was suspicion. A quiet, gnawing hum under everything. That morning, I was skimming emails over coffee in my office when a junior associate, bright kid named Theo, forwarded me a thank you note from a prospective investor. Great presentation from Joran and his mother, excited about the direction of Mavencore under such strong leadership. I blinked. I hadn't attended that meeting. I hadn't even been invited. The deck they were referencing, I never saw it. My hands tightened around the ceramic mug. I clicked through the attachments. The slides were polished. Professional. They carried my company's branding, colors I had chosen, values I had fought to define, but none of my fingerprints. Bryony arrived a little after 9, holding her usual iced coffee and tablet. I didn't even lift my head. Pull the latest investor prospectus, the one Vera and Joran used last Thursday. She froze mid-sip. You weren't in that meeting? No, and apparently neither was the truth. 15 minutes later, she came back into my office, face pale. You need to see this. She dropped a printed packet in front of me, a fresh prospectus. The logo remained unchanged, but inside? Strategic co-founder, Joran Landro, I read aloud. And look lower, Bryony said, voice tight. Third on the page, in smaller font, beneath Vera's name as Chair of Legacy Oversight, was mine. Founding advisor, Malis Ravenwood. I didn't speak. I couldn't. Bryony placed a hand on my shoulder. I checked the file metadata. It was edited from Vera's email. She's the one who submitted it to the board. I felt like I'd swallowed sand. She added, and get this, file title was Succession Outline Draft 2, so this wasn't the first. By noon, Vera showed up. No call, no heads up. She breezed through the glass doors in a lemon-yellow blazer like she owned the place. "Darling," she greeted me, cheeks stretched tight with faux warmth. "You're a hard woman to catch these days." "I didn't realize I needed to be caught," I replied, standing. Bryony quietly slipped out, shutting the office door behind her. Vera lowered herself into the chair across from my desk, crossing her legs with practiced elegance. "I saw the updated prospectus," I began. She smiled. "Oh, that. Just a bit of fine-tuning. Investors prefer a recognizable name at the front. You understand. And founding advisor is what now? Decorative?" Vera tilted her head. It's just optics, honey. Men close deals, especially Landro men. You're brilliant, no one's questioning that. But you know how the game is played? I held her gaze. No, I know how the game is rigged. She didn't flinch. I built legacy with my husband for 40 years. I won't let Joran start from scratch when he could be leading with strength. You mean with your strength? I mean with family. The word tasted rotten in her mouth. After she left, Joran called. Of course he didn't come in. He never did when things were messy. Look, he said, voice low and tired. I didn't think it'd go this far. You knew. It's just positioning. Investors like the story, better this way. It's temporary. Until what? I asked. Until I hand over everything? He hesitated. Come on, Melis. You're making this into a thing. No, I said quietly. You already did. I ended the call. That night, back home, I couldn't sleep. My mind kept replaying his voice, her smile, the look on Bryony's face. Around midnight, I heard the front door unlock. Joran walked in carrying a velvet box. He came into the living room where I sat, barefoot, wrapped in a throw blanket. I brought this, he said, holding it out. Let's put all this aside. We're getting married, remember? I opened the box. It wasn't a ring, just a folded note. I unfolded it slowly. Soon you won't have to worry about decisions. Family takes care of itself. Vera. My blood went still. I stood up, walked past him without a word, and shut myself in the home office. There, I pulled out the original incorporation paperwork from my locked file cabinet, my name, my signature, my terms. I whispered to the empty room, "No one takes this from me. Not quietly." I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I dozed on the couch in my office with the original incorporation papers pressed beneath my palm like they could anchor me to something real, something mine. Morning light crept through the windows, turning the hardwood floor pale and cold. I stayed there long after sunrise, my body still but my mind pacing like it was training for war. By mid-morning, I drove north toward the Upper Peninsula house. I needed air, distance, and a reminder of who I'd been before I let anyone call me Mrs. instead of Melis. That house was the last place my mother lived before she passed, and though I rarely went anymore, something about this moment, it needed her. The air was crisp and dry when I pulled up the gravel path. Fall had already started its quiet creep across the trees. Red-tipped maple leaves brushed against the windshield as if welcoming me home. Inside, everything was just as I'd left it. Still, a little dusty, but warm. I made tea, not because I wanted it, but because that's what she always did when she needed to think. I reached for the chest under the old hallway mirror. It was one of the few things I'd kept after her funeral. I had never really gone through it, not since that week after she passed when everything felt too fragile to touch. I lifted the lid and sorted through old photo envelopes, handwritten recipes, faded greeting cards with her sharp, tidy handwriting. Then I saw it, a yellowed newspaper clipping folded into a floral handkerchief. I unfolded the fabric and stared. "Local Bakery Transitions Ownership to Nephew," the headline read, and underneath a black and white photo of a storefront with a new sign, "Marlowe's Breads," my uncle's name. But the windows still had her signature white curtains, her chalkboard menu, her pride. I blinked. I had forgotten this. She never complained. She even smiled the day it happened. Said it was better for family. Said it was time to pass it on. But I remember now. She cried every night for weeks after that. Quiet, hidden behind the laundry room door, thinking I couldn't hear. "They called it a transition," I whispered aloud, "just like Vera." That word, transition, sounded gentle, professional, but in truth, it was a scalpel. I folded the clipping back up with shaking hands and drove back to Charleston in silence. Bryony met me at the office with a grim look and a legal folder in her arms. "I didn't want to ruin your time away," she said, "but you need to see this." She dropped the folder on my desk and flipped it open. "It's a prenuptial agreement." "I didn't sign anything," I said sharply. "I know, but Vera had her estate lawyer draft one. It was filed under a shell name. I only found it because I was cross-referencing public filings for another case." She pulled out the document and pointed to paragraph 8. "Post-marriage, all derivative innovations and intellectual properties related to Mavencore Solutions shall be considered part of the shared Landro legacy and subject to oversight by designated family leadership." My mouth went dry. "They wrote me out of my own mind," I said flatly. Bryony's eyes flashed. "They're trying to absorb you." "They planned this like a hostile acquisition," I muttered, more to myself than her. "And I'm not a founder to them, I'm an asset." That night I stared at the ceiling above my bed, fists clenched around the sheets. Rage didn't burn hot. It burned cold, focused. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I strategized. By morning, I had one thing planned. I'd accept the dinner invitation Vera had sent out for Friday night. "A celebration of legacy," the card read. She probably thought I'd show up in a modest dress, apologize for making waves, and kiss the ring. Instead, I printed something thin, devastating, and perfectly timed. I slid the document into a cream envelope and placed it beside my keys. Friday arrived quietly. I dressed in black, clean, sharp lines, no jewelry, no frills. I arrived alone and walked into the Landro estate with a calm that unsettled even me. Joran greeted me with that polished grin I used to love. "You came," he said. I did. He glanced at the envelope in my hand. "What's that?" "Just some paperwork," I said, breezing past him toward the dining room. Dinner was formal, old money stiff, with candles tall enough to cast shadows on the polished ceiling. Vera sat at the head of the table like royalty, smiling at the laughter, accepting compliments like they were owed. "Next week," she announced between the second and third course, "we finalize the transfer. Everything's on track for the Landro name to take its rightful place in tech leadership." I placed the envelope beside her wine glass. "You'll want to see this first." The room fell quiet. Vera opened the flap with careful fingers. She pulled out the document, eyes scanning, then pausing, then narrowing. Silence. Joran leaned over. "What is it?" Vera's face had gone pale. I stood slowly, chair legs soft against the rug. I met her eyes and said, "You've been playing chess with a queen." She flinched. "Check." Vera didn't speak. She just stared at the papers like they'd caught fire in her hands. Everyone else around the table paused, too. Forks mid-air, wine glasses suspended mid-sip, conversations frozen. I didn't give her the satisfaction of watching her flinch again. I walked out without waiting for dessert. By the time the weekend ended, the whispers had started. At brunch with a local tech partner Monday morning, she looked at me cautiously. "I heard you canceled the merger plan. Everything okay, Melis?" I offered a smile so polite it could cut porcelain. "Things are exactly how they should be." That evening, Bryony showed me a screenshot of a group chat from Charleston's Business Wives Circle. "She's unraveling. Overextended, poor thing." Let's be honest, Joran's mother carried the brand forward. It was laughable if it hadn't been so familiar. I closed the screen and said nothing, because I knew who had started it, and I knew exactly how she operated. Vera never made public moves unless she'd already poisoned the private ones first. That Thursday, I got a call from Judge Isolde Heron. Retired now, but once a respected figure in both business mediation and our family social circle. She had officiated my cousin's wedding. Sent handwritten cards each Christmas. She was charming, sharp. But I'd learned the hard way that sharp tools cut both ways. "Melis, dear," she began, "I heard there's been some tension." "That's one word for it," I replied. "I thought maybe we could meet. Neutral ground. Just a chat. You know I've always been fond of your mother. She was Grace under fire." That last line made something tighten behind my ribs. Grace under fire. That's what they called it when my mother lost everything and still showed up to bake bread for church fundraisers, like she hadn't just been erased from the business she built. We met at a small cafe off Queen Street. It was cozy, filled with the scent of cinnamon and butter. I chose a table by the window. Isolde arrived wearing pearls, cardigan perfect, manners sharper than her words. She ordered chamomile tea. "Vera asked me to speak with you, not to push anything," she added, patting my hand. "But perhaps to remind you what legacy means. We women often forget that pride can cost more than partnership." I didn't blink. I waited until the server had set her cup down, then said quietly, "Legacy doesn't come from submission, and ego isn't saying no to theft." Her eyes widened slightly, but she nodded as if she'd expected it. "Still," she offered, "is there no room for compromise?" "Not when the floor was rigged before I walked into the room." She didn't push again. The following morning, I sat with my legal team in a sunlit boardroom. 3 attorneys, a paralegal, and Bryony beside me like armor with red hair. We laid it out piece by piece. The drafts Vera and Joran had attempted to circulate. Documents with company letterhead I had never approved, dated under a shell LLC I'd let expire 5 years ago. They were meaningless legally, but if anyone less meticulous than Bryony had seen them, that could have gotten real. Intent mattered. Intent was everything. Joran, of course, tried one more time. Texted me after midnight. "Why are you doing this to us?" I stared at his message, thumb hovering. Then I typed back, "You're asking the wrong question. Why are you doing this with her?" I never hit send. I left it sitting there. Some silences speak louder than truth. Before noon, our firm had prepared the cease and desist, clean, surgical, and laced with citations of legal precedents for coerced intellectual property reclassification and asset misrepresentation. It was precise, cold, elegant. I signed it without hesitation. The final copy was emailed directly to Vera's counsel. A second, blind-copied version went to the Charleston Business Council marked confidential. Let them whisper about that. As I left the building, the sun was high, sharp through the glass of downtown towers. I tucked my sunglasses on, checked my phone. One new message, from Vera. "You'll regret humiliating this family. Watch what happens next." I stood on the curb, letting the message sit in my hand like a hot coal. Then I exhaled. Slowly. "Let's see who burns." The message still lingered on my screen as I walked into Mavencore the next morning. "You'll regret humiliating this family. Watch what happens next." It had been sent at 11:48 p.m. Classic Vera, striking after business hours when she knew I'd be alone, scrolling in silence with only my thoughts to keep me company. I didn't have time to dwell. My phone was already vibrating nonstop as I walked through the glass doors of our downtown building. Bryony met me at the elevator, her face tight. "You need to see this," she said without preamble, holding up her tablet. A blog I'd never heard of had posted an exclusive. The headline read, "Founder Fractures, Mavencore's CEO under internal review." Below it was a photo from my college days, taken at a beach party I barely remembered. Red cup in hand, windblown, blurry-eyed. I hadn't seen that photo in decades. Somehow it was now attached to vague accusations about erratic decisions, questionable fund allocations, and an ongoing internal conflict. "They're framing it like an anonymous tip," Bryony said quietly, "but it's too coordinated, and that picture, only someone with old personal access would have had it." My heart clenched. Joran. I stepped into my office and closed the door, not even sitting down yet. The email from legal was already open on my desktop. Subject line, "Internal filing revision, co-CEO status update." Bryony had forwarded it overnight with a note. "You didn't approve this. It went in after hours." Inside the document was a form filed with our internal investor platform, now listing Joran Landro, acting co-CEO, effective immediately. 3 board members had initialed it, not signed, but acknowledged. My name remained listed as founder, but founder status doesn't stop a knife when it's already halfway in your back. I sat down slowly, palms flat on the desk. This wasn't corporate maneuvering anymore. This was demolition, not just of position, of person. Outside the window, the Charleston harbor glittered like nothing was wrong. Inside my chest, I felt something quietly cracking. My jaw, my back, my breath, I was holding everything together too tightly. For the first time, I locked my office door, and then I whispered it aloud. This isn't a battle anymore, it's a dismantling. I didn't know how long I sat there unmoving until I heard a knock. "It's me," Bryony called gently. I opened the door, not saying anything. She stepped in, holding a small frame I hadn't seen in years. "She kept this in her kitchen," Bryony said, placing the photo down in front of me. "Your mom." It was my mother standing in front of her bakery, her name still hand-painted above the windows. A year before her brother quietly took over and replaced it with his. "She didn't quit," Bryony said, "even when they erased her." I looked at the photo, and for a while I couldn't feel anything. Then, quietly, I said, "She never got it back." Bryony didn't flinch. "No, but you will." That night, just as I was pouring myself a glass of water, I heard the knock on my apartment door. Joran. He stood there with that same smile he used to disarm me back when I thought we were building something real. "Hey," he said, as if this were normal, as if he hadn't just tried to pull the floor from under me. "Can I come in?" I didn't say no. I didn't say yes either. I stepped aside, but I didn't look at him. He walked in like he'd never left. "Look," he started. "I think all this, everything, it's just gotten too big, too fast, for all of us." I said nothing. "Maybe it's time you step back, just for a while," he continued. "Let things settle, let the board calm down. You'll always be the heart of the brand, May." He reached out like he was about to touch my shoulder. I stepped away. "Joran," I said slowly, "when you look at me, do you really not see the person you're betraying?" He blinked. "I'm trying to protect what we've built." "No," I said. "You're trying to protect what you can take." He didn't answer that, just exhaled and let himself out. After he left, I sat on the couch in the dark. The city outside my window pulsed with life, but I felt hollow. I stared at the framed photo Bryony left on my desk earlier. My mother had worked her hands raw to build something from nothing. She lost it, not because she failed, but because they decided her name didn't matter. I'd been quiet too long. I picked up my phone and opened the legal thread. No more middle ground, no more compromise. I typed slowly, deliberately. "We're no longer negotiating, prepare the suit." By the time Monday's sun rose over the Battery, I had already been awake for hours. Not from nerves, those had long since been stripped away, but from readiness. The kind that settles into your chest when you've finally stopped asking why and start asking, "How do I end this?" I arrived at Charleston Civil Court just after 7 a.m., wearing the same slate gray suit I'd once worn to secure my company's first multi-million-dollar deal. My fingers curled slightly as I held the pen over the dotted line. A small tremor ran through my hand, but my signature was still clean. Ravenwood versus Landro. Charges: civil fraud, defamation, breach of fiduciary trust, attempted hostile transfer. The court clerk took the folder and nodded like this was just another paper filed in the system. For me, it was a declaration. I wasn't their victim. I was their reckoning. Later that morning, I met with Mr. Greaves in the narrow, windowless conference room of his law firm. He placed the official stamped copy of the filing on the table between us like a chess piece. "They're going to come for blood now," he said flatly, folding his hands. "This won't be a clean dispute. This is Vera Landro." I met his gaze without blinking. "So will I." That same afternoon, Bryony called. Her voice was tight. "You need to come over." I headed to her apartment across town. On her coffee table sat a pristine wedding favor box, white and gold, tied with an elegant satin bow. I recognized it. It had been the sample box from Vera's rehearsal dinner plans. Inside was a single item, a thumb drive. We plugged it into Bryony's laptop. No label, no timestamp, just one audio file. I pressed play. A second of silence, then Vera's voice, crisp and deliberate. "Once she's married, we don't need her. We'll make her look unstable. Then Joran takes full control. It'll be smooth. If she pushes, we'll say she's paranoid." I paused the recording. The living room was silent except for Bryony's steady breathing. Someone in that house had recorded her. Someone had decided enough was enough. I didn't ask who. Whoever sent it had done more for me than Joran ever had. That night, I called Greaves again. "I'm sending you something," I said. "We won't release it to the press. Just ethics counsel. Quietly, strategically." He knew exactly where to go. By Wednesday, Charleston's legal blogosphere was on fire. The blog Ethics in Executive Affairs posted an anonymous analysis: unethical familial interference in mid-size enterprise management. It included transcripts of a private family conversation suggesting manipulation of corporate governance for personal consolidation. The quotes were lifted straight from Vera's voice. I didn't say a word publicly. I didn't need to. Within 2 days, the calls stopped. Emails slowed. Board members went silent. My inbox, once a flurry of concern and backdoor "Are you okay?" messages, became still. But not everyone stayed quiet. Joran sent a message Thursday morning. "That recording is out of context. You're ruining us." I stared at the text for a long time. Then I typed, "No. You did that when you let her speak for both of you. I never hit send. Instead, I just blocked the number." By Friday, something else began to shift. Public opinion. Former clients, small business owners, even longtime conservative investors started speaking up online. Quietly at first, then steadily. "She built Mavencore from nothing. No family name, no silver spoon," one post read. Another, "I did business with her when she worked from a co-working cubicle downtown. No one else would take our contract." And then the one that made me sit down and laugh, not because it was funny, but because it was finally true. "She built something from scratch, and they tried to gut her in pearls." I was still chuckling when Bryony walked into my office with a sleek envelope. "This came through the building's front desk," she said, handing it to me. I opened it and unfolded the thick cardstock. "You are cordially invited to the Landro Ravenwood rehearsal dinner. Saturday, 7 p.m., Vera Landro's estate. Formal attire required. Kindly confirm attendance." Bryony raised an eyebrow. I smiled. For the first time in weeks, I smiled without bitterness or exhaustion. "Oh, I'll be there." The night air in Charleston clung to my skin, thick with humidity and judgment. I stood at the entrance of the Charleston Museum's grand ballroom, letting the weight of the moment settle on my shoulders. My reflection caught briefly in the glass-paneled doors. Sleek black dress. No jewelry except for the thin chain my mother once wore when signing the papers for her bakery. That night, she thought she was building a legacy. I wore it to remind myself I was finishing what she never got to. Inside, the ballroom glowed with curated elegance. Soft amber lights, towering floral arrangements, champagne flutes in every hand. But beneath the shimmer, tension pulsed. I didn't head for the family table. I didn't greet the guests lining the velvet rail. I simply walked to the far edge of the room and stood silently, observing, waiting. A woman in pearls whispered to her husband, her eyes flicking toward me. "That's her," she said. He squinted. "The one suing her own in-laws?" "No," she corrected, "the one they tried to erase." I wasn't here to mingle. I was here to end it. Vera took the mic with the poise of a pageant queen. Her voice, syrupy sweet, rolled over the room like a curtain drop. "Tonight," she began, "we celebrate family, tradition, unity." She glanced at me across the floor. "The things that endure when emotions don't." I didn't move. She raised her glass. "To the Landro legacy. May it always find the right stewards." That was my cue. I lifted my glass slowly, letting the stem turn slightly between my fingers. Then, clear and calm, I spoke, loud enough for the room to hush. "To the women who build alone," I said. "And to those who try to steal quietly, until they're seen." It was like cracking porcelain. The murmur of voices stopped. Glasses paused mid-air. One man lowered his phone, forgetting to hit record. Across the room, Joran's face drained of color. Vera's eyes narrowed. She placed her flute on the table without a sound and began walking toward me. She was still 3 steps away when her voice cut the silence. "You ungrateful, bitter little..." and then it landed. The slap wasn't a soft hiss. It was sharp, brutal, unmistakable, a slap that sliced through the music and the murmurs. The crowd gasped as one. Someone dropped a wine glass. The stem shattered. My cheek stung, but I didn't flinch. I stood still. Tall. Bryony was the first to move, stepping between us like a storm wall. "Touch her again," she warned, "and you won't need a lawyer. You'll need a stretcher." Security started moving in, but I lifted a hand to halt them. Vera's voice cracked with rage. "She deserves nothing. That company was a gift to our family." "Gift?" I echoed, still frozen in place. "Is that what you tell yourself at night?" Joran rushed over and grabbed Vera's arm. His voice was barely a whisper, but I heard it. "You just ended everything." Around us, guests began backing away, some whispering, some watching with the stunned silence of people realizing they've been clapping for the wrong side all along. I noticed one of the investors, Paul Garrison, murmuring to his wife. He wasn't even hiding the words. "Slander, public assault, breach of decorum. She'll never get funding again." But he wasn't talking about me. And then came the final twist I hadn't anticipated. From a table tucked near the back, a woman rose. Gray hair pulled into a soft knot, black suit tailored sharp as any gavel. Judge Margaret Chen. She walked calmly, with purpose, and handed me a crisp ivory card. "I saw and heard everything. If you need a statement, formal or legal, let me know." Vera paled. Joran didn't move. I turned the card over once in my hand and slid it into my clutch without a word. All around us, the ballroom sat fractured, like a chandelier one bolt away from collapse. I took one step forward, then another. The pain on my cheek pulsed with each beat of my heart, but I let the words rise from somewhere deeper than fury. "Tomorrow's wedding is off," I said quietly, letting each syllable slice clean. Then I looked Vera straight in the eyes. "But the reckoning has just begun." I woke to my phone vibrating across the nightstand like it had something to say. I didn't reach for it immediately. The silence in the room was thick, only interrupted by Bryony's soft breathing on the couch where she'd insisted on staying the night. Eventually, I rolled over and tapped the screen. First headline: Mother-in-law slaps tech founder in ballroom showdown. Second: Charleston heiress assaults bride-to-be, caught on camera. Third: Slapgate trends as video of public humiliation goes viral overnight. I sat up, swung my legs over the side of the bed, and stared at the open window. Outside, the city moved like it always did, people getting dressed, traffic building, coffee brewing. But something fundamental had shifted, not just in my life, in theirs. Because for once, I wasn't the one being rewritten. By 9 a.m., my phone had 47 missed calls, some from media outlets, some from investors who had once ignored my pitches, now begging for comment. I ignored them all. At 10:12 a.m., Bryony walked in holding 2 coffees. She didn't say anything, just placed one in front of me and handed over a crisp envelope that had been slipped under the door. It was Vera's invitation, formal as ever. "Malis Ravenwood, please confirm your presence at today's ceremony." I smiled at the absurdity. A ceremony, after all that? 10 minutes later, Bryony's phone pinged. Her eyes narrowed as she read. "The cathedral just pulled out," she said. "Officially. They sent a statement to Vera's planners saying, and I quote, 'We do not condone violence against women and will not provide our premises to a celebration that undermines our principles.'" I exhaled, long and quiet. The dominoes had begun. By noon, the florist followed suit. Then the caterers. Even the makeup artist sent a polite yet pointed message. "In light of recent footage, we decline to participate further. Integrity over glam." The spiral tightened. At 2 p.m., Joran called. I let it go to voicemail. 5 minutes later, he tried again. "Against my better judgment," I answered. His voice was raw. "Malis, please, this is all a misunderstanding. Just tell the press it was family tension. Say we worked it out." I didn't yell. I didn't cry. You should have worked it out the moment your mother told people I was unstable, I said. You should have stood between us the day she erased my name from my own company. I didn't think she'd go this far, he whispered. You let her go this far. I ended the call before he could reply. By late afternoon, I was standing on the courthouse steps again. This time not to file anything, but to speak. The air was warmer than it had been the night before, but I felt cooler inside than I had in months. Reporters flanked both sides, some respectful, some hungry. I stepped to the mic. I'm not here today to press criminal charges. Not yet, I said, but I am here to reclaim what was mine, and to make it clear, I was never unstable. I was inconvenient for those who couldn't manipulate me. I stepped away before they could shout follow-up questions. I wasn't performing, I was closing a chapter. Back home, I found a wedding card I hadn't opened, tucked deep inside the gift bag Vera had delivered 2 months ago. On the front, silver script. Welcome to the family. Inside, her handwriting. Can't wait to call your company ours. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I walked to the kitchen, lit a match, and watched the card curl into ash in the sink. An hour later, the Charleston Business Guild released a statement. Joran's credentials suspended pending ethics review. Vera's firm began losing clients by the minute, some simply posting, "Not who we are." And then the text from Judge Chen, "Ethics complaint formally filed. I've offered to testify." It was over, and it was beginning. As the sun dipped below the live oaks lining my street, Bryony hugged me from behind. You okay? She asked softly. I met my own reflection in the hallway mirror. The woman staring back was tired, but no longer small. Not yet, I said, but I'm not anyone's pawn anymore. The scent of cedarwood mixed with cool mountain air as I stood beneath the awning of our new retreat space in Asheville. Behind me, 12 women, each a founder, each scarred and still building, sat quietly in a semicircle. The silence wasn't awkward. It was chosen. We were about to begin our first Reclaiming Power weekend. 3 months had passed since the wedding that never was. I hadn't spoken to Joran since the day after the slap. I never reached out, and he never tried. Not once. Maybe he knew better. Or maybe he didn't know me at all. Not really. Sometimes I still wondered, had he ever loved me? Or had he only loved the illusion of someone easier to shape? Either way, I stopped asking questions I knew wouldn't bring peace. The months that followed were a blur of cleanup and rebuilding. Vera was removed from 2 corporate boards, one quietly, the other publicly. Joran left Charleston under what his last firm called a mutual severance. They worded it politely, but people knew. The Landro name used to be synonymous with old money and legacy. Now it was whispered in boardrooms with a different tone, one that carried shame, not pride. Investors began calling what happened to me legacy theft. It became a case study. A Harvard Business Review picked up my testimony from the civil hearing. Judge Chen published an op-ed a few weeks later, "What I witnessed that night." It went viral, not for the drama, but for how clearly it dismantled the myth of silence being grace. Bryony sat across from me now, tablet in hand, reviewing the new mentorship matches for our incubator. She'd been my assistant once. Now she was operations director and the reason this retreat even opened on time. She was also my friend, my anchor, my reminder that loyalty wasn't a myth. I think Aline should be paired with Marissa, she said without looking up. Same industry, same kind of trauma. I nodded. Let's make it happen. Later that afternoon, I wandered back into the main office building, still unfinished, still echoing when I walked. In the corner, under warm light, was a glass frame mounted to the wall. Inside it hung the black dress I wore the night Vera slapped me. People asked why I kept it. Because I never raised my voice that night. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I let the truth speak louder than the bruise. The dress wasn't a trophy. It was restraint, and control, and proof. We'd remodeled Mavencore's mission in the months since. We weren't just building tools for entrepreneurs. We were building protection, legal scaffolding, founder-first policies, early-stage education for women who didn't want to be decorative wives in their own companies. It was quiet work, but it mattered. I passed by a small display shelf by the reception desk. On it sat a cracked porcelain card holder. One of the women in this weekend's cohort had brought it. She said it was the only thing left from her first office after her in-laws restructured her out. We all had stories like that. As sunset approached, I stepped outside again. The women were talking now, soft laughter, shared notes, nods that said, "I've been there too." Bryony handed me a lapel mic. I clipped it on without fanfare. I walked to the front, cleared my throat gently. "Thank you all for being here," I said. "This isn't a seminar. It's a reclamation." They quieted. If they'd asked me kindly, I began, I might have shared what I built, but when they tried to take it, without permission, without respect, I didn't scream. I didn't fight in their arena. I gave them silence, and then I gave them truth. No applause followed, just the kind of stillness that feels like oxygen entering old wounds. Later that evening, after everyone had gone to their cabins, I sat alone in the main house, watching dusk settle across the trees. I reached into the bottom drawer of my desk and pulled out a folder I hadn't touched since the morning of the non-wedding. Inside was a final card, the one Vera had sent in the bridal package months ago. "Can't wait to call your company ours." I read it one last time. Then I shredded it, slowly, and fed the pieces into the small fireplace behind me. Not out of rage, but because there's a difference between burning something down and choosing what deserves the flame. Bryony entered quietly and rested a hand on my shoulder. "You did it," she whispered. I didn't answer right away. I stared at the last embers in the firebox. "I didn't do it to win," I said. "I did it to not disappear." She nodded, and I felt her hand tighten slightly. Outside, the woods were quiet, not threatening, just full of space. I had no need to be called family again. I'd become something else.